Hello, I am your host, Ebie Hepworth, with the Let Me Ask You This podcast, and I start every episode by saying, thank you for being here. You could literally be anywhere in the world right now, and you're choosing to be here, you're choosing to listen to this conversation, and I want to say I really don't take that lightly. I'm so grateful. And I also want to say I am so flipping excited about this episode because it is with somebody that I have watched from afar for years. I have learned so much from the books that she's written, and I just, when I was praying about this podcast and I'm talking to the Lord, like, God, who do you want? She just kept coming into my heart and my mind, and I'm like, okay, so I reach out to her. I'm like, hey, can I steal an hour of your time to just glean from the wisdom of who you are? And she was so gracious. She's like, absolutely. What are you doing in 2 weeks? And so it's just, she's incredible. So this episode is with Brittany Salmon. She is a professor, a writer of a book called It Takes More Than Love. She's a Bible teacher. She has her master's in intercultural studies. She has another master's in teaching. She is a professor. She's a mother of 5 beautiful kids. And she's a fellow twin mom and fellow twin adoptive mom. So I felt like we needed like a secret handshake to start the episode. I was so excited about this episode. And I know I get excited about every episode, but leading up to this, right before we pressed record, I was talking with my husband in the kitchen and I was like, I'm so excited to just honestly unravel Brittany's mind, who she is, just what she carries. She's so powerful. And so I'm just excited for you to listen to this episode. We talk about all the things, and I felt like I ended this episode with just a new friend in North Carolina. And so without further ado, this is my conversation with Brittany Salmon. Oh, how's your day going?
It's going pretty good. I mean, I'll give you a warning. All 5 kids are here. They're currently being watched, but you never know.
Are you kidding?
You just never know when one's going to run in or not.
Totally.
It's been good. Actually, for the first time ever, let me turn my phone on or my computer on Do Not Disturb. There we go. Starting getting popped up. My 5 children slept in today.
I saw your Instagram. I saw 9:25.
I had to wake 4 of them up, which that just doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in our house. So
no, that doesn't happen in our house either. By 7 before the sun every day.
I don't know what happened. This summer we've had a few instances where our 4th, Zeke, who is always our early riser, has been slower this summer on getting up, which I'm like, okay, yay. Like, we're sleeping until 7:38. Praise the Lord.
Totally.
But 9:30 does not happen. So
yeah, that's how we are.
So I was pumped. I'm having a great morning.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to hear that. Okay, so are you the type that you have to wake up before they wake up?
Absolutely not. No. I wish I was that type. If that makes sense. I wish I was that type. I probably should be that type with the amount of chaos in our family. Yeah. But probably part of the reason why it is our kids have always gotten up, or at least we've always had younger kids. So the older ones start to sleep in, but there's always another little kid. And so we will be woken up at the crack of dawn by somebody. And so it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to wake up at 4. So at this point, it's just like, well, this is what it is. And I'll wake 100%. Up when they wake up. But.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so it's Brittany Salmon is how I say it, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so Brittany, tell us a little bit about yourself. Somebody who has no idea anything about you. Give us a little SparkNotes version of who you are.
Sure. Well, my name is Brittany, and I currently live in Wilmington, North Carolina with my husband, Ben, and 5 children, Felicity, Noelle, Jude, Zeke, and Eva. Our oldest kids are 12. They're twins. And then our youngest goes all the way down to 11 months, and she turns...
I didn't realize you had twins, Brittany.
Yes. They turn 12 in 2 weeks.
Okay, I have twins.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so I feel like we have we need a special handshake of just pure insanity.
Yes, absolute. Now, how old are yours currently?
They're 3, so you can literally
have mercy. And literally. You're here. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. I don't think I could create a coherent sentence at that point. So, done.
Thank you. Okay, so 5. Okay,
yes. So we have
wild.
5 kids. Our youngest is turning 1 in a few weeks, and so we have 12 to 1, almost 1.
Oh my gosh.
And we currently live in Wilmington, North Carolina. but we moved here from Texas a few years ago. North Carolina is home for Ben and I, but we've been away for a little bit. But we've regularly moved in our marriage, probably about every 2 to 3 years. And we're finally at a point where this is it. We're, Lord willing, done.
Because of your husband's work?
Yes, because of my husband's work.
Okay.
And so we've done that. And I'm a professor and a writer, but I'm also a preacher's daughter. I grew up in the church. I love Jesus. I'm a preacher's daughter who didn't go off and rebel, but I have my own internal rebellions, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Healthy.
mean I'm not necessarily saying I did it all perfect or right. I did a lot of mistakes, but I've always loved the church by God's grace. And so currently we've lived in Wilmington for 2 years, but I'm still kind of figuring out what it's like to be in a new town with 5 children and what it's like to make friends at this age and in this season of life.
Maybe we should just talk about that for a second.
Yeah. It's just
how
hard.
On earth, as a grown woman with children, do you find your ride or die homies where you're like, because you're trying to build history and catch up with all these people, while meanwhile obviously taking care of the clan. So it's like, how do you do that?
Honestly, this has been our hardest move. I feel like with fewer children, it was a little bit easier. In that, like, you could find somebody that's like, oh, you have 2 kids. Oh, you have 3 kids. Let's get them together. Similar ages. Now I'm like, well, we got a whole range. In fact, somebody the other day was like, hey, you want to come over for a play date, but just bring your younger 2. And I was like, I actually can't. I can't, because I don't know who's going to take care of my older 3. So, because during the day, my husband is gone. So, but for us, one thing we've actually got, by God's grace, some of my best friends from college, they lived in Dallas when we lived in Abilene, Texas. And so we got to live close by for a few years there. Well, they just decided to up and move to North Carolina this last year. And it has been the biggest gift because we haven't had to start over.
And are they in Wilmington?
They are literally just a few houses down.
Stop it.
And so we can walk to each other's house. They just moved into their house. They've been in Wilmington for a year, but they just moved into their house, which is down the street. And it's one of those things where I keep pinching myself going, is this real? Is this happening? But making new friends is really, really hard. So we're like, we have each other. That's it.
And you know what? Quality over quantity.
Yes.
Now that you have, and it's like, now you need to write a book about having a best friend down the street because you're living an actual rom-com as a grown woman.
It's legitimately a dream come true.
Do they have kids too in similar ages?
They have 4 kids. And also, so a fun fact for people who don't know us, we're an adoptive family. So some of our kids joined our family through adoption. And one of their kids joined their family through adoption. So there's that commonality where we can kind of hang out and get together. And you don't have to explain a lot. You're like, yeah, totally got it.
100%. You know what language to use, what not to, all the things. It's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So I can't complain too much.
Okay, and take us through the last 5 years. You say that you're a theologian, author, a professor. Do you have your PhD or a master's? Remind me.
I have it's called an EDD. It's a doctorate in education. So
okay. Oh, dear Lord. Okay. So my first question is, why on earth did you do that? And then my second question is, what are you doing with it?
So why on earth did I do that? I still don't know. No. It's one of the
you paid to be tortured and to learn. Well, that's while you were a mom too, probably.
Completely wild. So I went to seminary. My husband and I met in seminary. Okay. So we met when we were doing our masters, and there are quite a few professors there. There were not a lot of females at that time in seminary, and about 6 years ago, maybe. Yeah, because I graduated in 2023. So about 6 years ago, a professor called me and said, hey, Brittany, we have this doctoral program. We would really like to create a cohort of students that represent a variety of voices. Would you be willing? And I was like, hold on, are you talking about you just want a female, right? Let's speak in plain terms. You need some women, right?
You
That's
totally.
what it is. That's what's happening. And he's like, yep, that's what he's like, I just think you'd be a great fit for this program. Would you consider doing it? And so I prayed about it. At first I was like, at the time I had 3 kids. I was like, we have 3 children who are young. I don't know if this is a great fit, but I talked to some other women who have done it. They're like, honestly, it doesn't get any easier. So any phase of life until your kids are out of the house,
yep.
it's just going to be chaos. And she's like, so might as well start now. And turns out we added Zeke during that doctoral program via adoption. And then after I graduated, about 2 months later, we were placed with Eva, our baby. And so a lot of life has changed in the last 6 years. And I wasn't looking for a doctoral degree, but I was teaching adjunct online.
Okay.
For a university, for a Christian university. And I've been doing that ever since. And honestly, they accepted me with 2 master's degrees, and they were like, you don't need a doctorate, you can do this. But I do feel like the doctorate has helped me be a better professor, a better educator. I love to read. I love to learn. And in that season, it was great. Do I ever want to do anything like that again? No. People are like,
which means that you probably will.
They're like, you should do a PhD. And I'm like, absolutely not.
And then you wrote a book in the middle of all that.
Yeah.
How?
I honestly, only by the grace of God. I don't know how. It's one of those things where, looking back at that season where we were growing our family, I was in grad school. I had to slow down. Some people could do that program in 3 to 4 years. I did it in 5. So, I did it at a slower pace that served my family. I did it at, there was a season during COVID when I was writing the book, and I think I took like a class per semester versus the multiple ones that people were doing. And I just slowed it down to a pace that's doable for our family for that season. And so it didn't look traditional. It didn't look normal like what my fellow classmates were doing. But it worked for our family. And I eventually finished.
Yeah, you finished. I've referred that book to so many fellow adoptive families, and I have gleaned so much from it. And one of my questions is, so I'm working on my book right now, and I basically, the only summer schedule I can get with writing is, it was Tuesdays and Thursdays to write while a babysitter came and watched all 90 of my kids. And it's like, I got 5 hours. And it's like, and it's stressful. How did you balance all of those kids? And because I feel like I find myself at the keyboard and I'm like, Holy Spirit, fill me. I find myself wanting to kind of get wrapped up in him. Yeah. And so how on earth do you harness that type of discipline to write a book while momming and teaching?
I think it's really hard because everyone is unique. So I have some friends who are writers, and they're like, well, I get up early and it's just a habit. So every day I get up, and after a while, like, you get the habit going and your brain starts working. And I'm like, that's cool. That doesn't work. That's never worked for me.
It's not an option.
I think that's awesome. I go with God on that. I have other ones who like, I get creative late at night. I'm like, I'm like finishing a marathon at 8 p.m. So Same. that also doesn't work for me. And so I'm the same in that I have to get a sitter, or I have to have, a chunk of time where I can sit and think and be creative and shut down social media and all distractions, any and all distractions. I just got to be able to think. Like, I have to be able to think a thought in order to write well. And there's some seasons where that comes easier. In a season with a full house, it's really, really hard. And it just takes total reliance on God. But I can't give you any tips other than the fact of the day I sat down to write I have a writing project that I'm working on, and I had 4 hours at a coffee shop, 4 hours. And I was like, oh, listen, I can write about 3,000 words in 4 hours. I've got this. I've got this. I sat down and I maybe wrote like 400 words total. And I was like, well, today is not the day. It's just not happening today. But it's just a reliance on the Lord and knowing that there's gonna be good days and there's bad days, but we keep at it. And we trust that God will do his work, and that ultimately this book that you're writing, it's not about you. It's not about how successful it is, how many books it sells, what list it gets on. It's just about being faithful to the call and to the message that God has given you. And if he's called you to it, girl, you'll complete it. There'll be some bumps. It's not going to look like, everyone else's writing journey, but you'll get it done.
100%. I feel like there's this kind of almost, I guess I'd call it a lie in the church, that people say if you're graced for something that you're just going to kind of float through it. It's going to come easy. And I think people forget that grace requires, like, it's actually really, really hard to be disciplined and actually, put your foot to the path and forge. It's like, and then you're battling the inner mind the whole time. And it's like, Lord.
Yes, absolutely. Oh. I regularly feel like an imposter, and I've had to tell myself, no degree, no title, no book. It doesn't matter what happens. I regularly feel like an imposter when I sit down to write. There are seasons where it's better than others, but I have to fight that for truth, where it's like, God has called me to this work. I feel a like Holy Spirit urge to get these words out.
Yes.
The rest of it doesn't matter. So the rest of it just doesn't matter. And I have to remind myself of that truth regularly, of like, this looks differently from someone else, but this is what God's called me to.
100%. And my prayer the whole time is like, Lord, I want to do this with you, not for you.
Correct.
So like, come into my fingertips at the keyboard or at the pencil on the paper. Like, okay, so tell us about your book. In the Spark Notes, you probably killed your elevator pitch. My dog is at the
you're
store.
fine.
Okay. Tell me about basically a glimpse of what you've written.
So the book's called It Takes More Than Love. It is a Christian guide to navigating the complexities of cross-cultural adoption. And so it's basically a book written for adoptive and foster families who are caring for children of different ethnicities. Obviously, in 2024, and really the last 6 years, talking about race is a really, really hot topic. It's divisive. It's not pleasant. The politics of our nation, and I'm not going to jump in there, but just the nature of talking about race at all, you usually will get some extreme responses on both sides. And so what was lacking was a Christian resource for adoptive families to say, how do I do this well? How do I do this well in a way that honors Imago Dei in my kid, that celebrates who God made them to be, who God designed them to be in our home well? How do we do that well? How do we do that in a way that honors God, that honors our kids, that honors our kids' first culture? And so that's where that book was birthed from. Is there's a lot of people, when we started the adoption process, I was like scouring the internet for resources, and there just weren't Christian voices talking about it. Yeah. You would have all sorts of different voices talking about it well, but it's, what is this like from a biblical perspective?
Yeah. That's amazing. You're like, I have read Dr. Siegel about 1 million times. Can we get some other?
Yes. Yes.
So, okay. And so I emailed you a few things here. Mm-hmm. And so one of the questions I asked you was, as you unpack the story of who you are, what's one word that you would use to describe your experience with God?
So I didn't come up with one word. I'm so sorry. This is so like,
I love it. I wouldn't expect a writer to do such a thing.
I'm so sorry, but it's 2 words. And it goes before you. And I was thinking about the passage in Deuteronomy 31, where Moses talks to Joshua, and Joshua's about to lead the people. And he basically says, hey, the Lord has gone before you. And this idea of, he goes before us, and we could, I was like, should I like trim it down to providence? Should do all these different things? No. But just the idea that God has gone before me in my life. And I've seen that in high moments. I have seen that in really, 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 really low moments. I've seen it in heartaches and suffering, and in the mundane in between, that God has gone before me. He's provided manna for that day, for that season. And so when I start to worry, and when I start to get anxious, or when I start to try to like over plan, I have to remind myself of this phrase, hey, he's gone before you. He goes before you. He goes before you. And so the phrase, not the word, would be that he goes before me. He goes before us. And that's kind of what has stood out to me.
Wow. Do you feel like as you mother, as you wife, as you write, do you feel like that fingerprint of that concept is like really like just been written into your family?
Very much so. I think, and I think that that's a storyline that's not an easy one to really come to grips with. When you're saying, hey, God has gone before you. Yeah. What Moses was saying to Joshua is, don't fear. Don't worry. This is going to be really hard. This journey is not going to be easy, but the Lord has gone before you. And so I feel like we've learned that through going through really hard things. Right. And it's been a hard lesson to learn. And it's a lesson that, even though it's one that I will verbally say to you on this podcast, it's still one that I have to wrestle with in my heart daily. of just like, all right, the Lord has gone before us in this. I have to trust the Lord. He is trustworthy. He has gone before us in this, and he'll provide for this season. And so whatever may come, the Lord's gone before us. And that sounds very cliche. And I think cliches get kind of a bad rep because they're used sometimes to put a Band-Aid on a hard situation. But when you're really, really bleeding and you've got this giant wound, what I have found is that these cliches, they lose their softness because it's not just a Band-Aid. When someone puts a Band-Aid on, it's literally life-saving medicine. This truth is life-saving medicine, that the Lord has gone before you. He is trustworthy and true, and he will provide for whatever journey you're on.
Come on, I am seeing that preacher daughter rise up right now.
Sorry.
Love it. Come on, you're gonna be fired up. It's so good. Okay, so that probably would bleed into the next question. Is like, when you look at your life, as especially me, from someone who I don't barely know you. I'm on the other side of the country. I've watched you for years, and I see you as this accomplished, present, tender mother, writer. You're like in the marketplace, and that you're helping shape minds. There's so many things you could be proud of. I feel like my question is, are you most proud of the way that you have clung on to that truth throughout the different seasons you found yourself in?
Absolutely. You know, I read that question. I was like, what is the thing that I'm most proud of? And I was like, it's honestly, there's a lot of unseen moments in our life that I don't want to necessarily share on the World Wide Web, but they're those low valleys, those parts where you are at your wit's end and you're going, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know how I got here. I don't know what the Lord is doing in this moment. My heart is shattered into 1,000 different pieces, and I don't know which way's up. It's those moments in my life where the Lord has proven himself to be faithful. He's proven himself to be true. He's proven to have gone before the hard, and he's a trustworthy story writer. So we know that even when the world means something for evil, God will use it for our good. And so we see that in a number of different ways in our lives and in the hard parts of our stories. But I think the thing that I am most proud of is that through it all, I have come out on the other side and said, hey, God's still faithful. He's still good. And that's not of my own doing. It's by grace, the sheer grace of God. But I think it's because our God has gone before us. He has provided manna for each day. He's provided for each season. He has led us through the valleys. And he's led us through the mountains. And people see different parts of that story, but not the whole thing. But what I look back and see is I see the hand of God and his providence and his protection and his just guiding us through what the world has kind of tossed our way. And that has just been an absolute gift to my life, just absolute gift to my faith journey.
Oh my goodness, 100%. And so when it comes to him going before you in all of the different roles, we'll kind of narrow in on your motherhood journey. When you decided your heart was open to adoption, my first question is, how did you navigate the conversation with the twins, because it was just the two, big two first?
Yeah.
Okay. What did that conversation look like?
You know, they were little, and I think Ben and I had known from the time we were engaged that we thought we were pretty certain adoption would be the only way we'd be able to build our family. And so the twins were a fun surprise. And so,
that's so fun.
Yes. They were, it was very fun. It's like, surprise, you're pregnant. Surprise, there's two of them. And we're like, oh, okay. So
did you carry them full term, by the way?
No, I didn't. They spent about a month of their life in NICU, and they're about 2 months early. But we would just sit them down from an early age. And thankfully we were at a church where we saw other families who were adoptive families. And so we could talk to them and say, hey, you know how this family is built through adoption? We're considering doing the same. And we would get, storybooks of diverse families and different things. And we just had really open conversations of and when they're little, the beauty of little children is they're building their framework still. So they don't know what they don't know. And you're helping build that framework. And I think we go into a lot of these conversations expecting, you hear the world tell you oh, well, they're going to be jealous, or they're going to be this, or they're going to be territorial. And some kids are built that way. Some kids aren't. You don't really know what they're going to wrestle with until they get here. But we went at it kind of all right, girls. So how do you feel about getting a baby brother? And they're like, yeah, this is awesome. And so they were pretty pumped about it. And our kids still to this day, our younger kids, we just welcomed Eva into our family last year, and we had a 4-year-old. He was almost 4 at the time. And we were like, hey, we're going to get baby sister, and she's going to join our family like you joined our family. So she's going to have a birth mom and a birth dad and a birth family, and they're going to choose our family. And we don't know what it looks like, but we're trusting God. And they're just like, cool, Mom.
Yeah.
Cool.
Can I have a snack?
Yeah, exactly. And our big ones now are the ones that have a little bit more complex questions, who are going, okay, so why? What brings a person to make this decision? We're now at the part of having the last probably 4 years with our older 3, having some really honest but grace-filled conversations where we're growing them to hopefully be able to see birth parents and other people with respect and honor as fellow image bearers, who may have life stories that are different from ours, our life experiences. And so to approach those with compassion, not criticism. And
I love that.
We're now starting to have those conversations with our older kids. But when they're young, the young part's the easy part. When we were super fearful, we were super terrified of it. At the time, I'm like, hey, this is what we're doing. They're just like, great, cool. Can't wait.
Yeah, they're just like so nice. They're just pumped. There's like more kids, more snacks, more car seats. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, well, then how do you, obviously they're the ones the old 2 are bringing the questions. Are they the ones initiating it? I want you to explain for families that are multicultural like yours, like mine, how do you have those conversations in a space in a healthy way, in a way that they're age appropriate?
Well, one of our strategies, and not just race, but a lot of things for our family, and not everyone does this, and that's fine. So this is just our personal preference. I'm not saying that you have to do this, but we try to get ahead of it. So if we're getting to an age or stage where we see this potential question or this potential thing coming around a corner, we try to go ahead and have the conversation preemptively and proactively, and not like the whole thorough thing, but just like, hey, just so you're aware, some of our kids' birth moms stay with us. And so one of them stayed with us while she, just after she had another baby. And obviously we have taught our kids that, hey, it takes a mommy and a daddy to have a baby, and this is God's good design. And so we knew she was coming with a baby without a daddy. And so we sat our girls down at the time and said, hey, we know that we've had these conversations that it takes a mommy and a daddy to have a baby. Well, this girl's coming and she's going to stay with us for the weekend. She has another baby. And I want to be very clear here that different people make different choices with their lives, and we want to honor and respect her. And I want you to know that God loves her. And so this is not something that we're going to say, hey, where's their daddy? We're not going to ask that question. Totally. If you have any questions while she's here, you can ask me at night when we go to bed. I'll say, hey, do you have any questions about this? And so I let them know, hey, this is happening. These are the times when we can talk about it. These are not the times we can talk about it. But it's naturally, I think this complex life we're living, Ben and I have done our best to try to get ahead of some things. That doesn't mean that we've not missed some stuff. We're like, oh, that caught us off guard. But for conversations about race, we have them often and early on. And it's a part of our parenting where we're like, hey, our son's name is Jude. When he was like 2 or 3, we would do verbal affirmations with him. I'm like, hey, Jude, who are you? He's like, I am a strong Black man who loves Jesus. And so like we're making his Blackness a thing of affirmation. It is a part of his identity. Is it the only thing? Is it the sole thing? Absolutely not. But we are naming a part of who he is, and claiming it good because God says it's good. And so with our girls, we were like, hey, Jude, when he was baby, like, Jude's Black, you're white. God made people with different colored skin, and this is a good thing. And so we were having these conversations as our kids grow. Now, I'm painting this in a beautiful light. There's also times where I've had to say, hey, that word we just heard by another kid, that is a racial slur. So we don't say those words. Also, if you ever hear anyone saying that about your brother, or a friend or a kid on the playground, that is an absolute, you tell a parent, or you tell a teacher, or you tell a Sunday school teacher, because let's not pretend like it doesn't happen in the church sometimes. And so we have those conversations with our kids. We've ahead of time to give them the tools for our family when we face them, which we do, and we have, and we will continue to do so. This is how we respond in a way that honors the dignity of our kids and honors our family, and just God in general.
I love that. I love that. Well, so for you as a adoptive mother, how have you found the best and most liberating way to build long-term, sustainable, healthy connections with your beautiful children's mothers?
That's a hard question. Every adoption is different, and we have hopes and dreams, and some of those are coming to fruition and some of those are not. And so I think part of being an adoptive mother is learning to hold this both and nature of hoping, believing, praying, working towards this idea of a beautiful restored relationship, while also grieving the brokenness that exists. Because we always want to keep our kids safe. We want to protect them for as long as we can from certain things, but we also cannot protect them from the broken parts of their story. We just can't. So there are parts of their story, embracing and knowing, hey, we're going to have to grieve this. They're going to have to grieve this. And all I can do is serve as a bridge. My child's going to have to one day build the bridge and figure out, okay, this is who I am as a person. I can provide a few beginning planks, but they're going to be the ones who have to decide, this is the type of relationship I want or don't want. And so I view myself as, I have to keep this door wide open. I am here holding space, hoping and praying and believing and working towards the same redemption that I hope and pray for my kid. Our God is good. Our God is a God of redemption. Why do we think that same redemption for our kids, but it's not for their first family? And so that storyline might look differently. That work might look differently, but I view my role as like a placeholder who is advocating for restoration in all parties of the adoption triad. I am not the center of the story. It's not about my feelings. It's not about how I feel about it. It is, how can I love my children well and their biological family and where they came from? How can I do that well as a believer? And that sounds really pretty, but it's messy and it's hard. And sometimes it's sending messages and being ghosted for months at a time. Sometimes it's extending invitations and getting rejected. Sometimes it's continuing on this journey and doing it, and they take you up on it and they come hang out at your house for a weekend. Like it's just been a different journey for each of our adoptions. And I've had to learn, redemption can look differently for everyone and every storyline. It's not my job to dictate how it looks. It's just my job to pray and work and be open and forgive and work towards my kids having the tools to thrive, and hoping and praying and partnering with organizations so that my kids' first family can get the tools to thrive.
Brittany, you're like talking in Post-it notes. It's so powerful. The concept of a placeholder for redemption is like, and obviously you and I see so many adoptions, and people probably fall into your DMs too, and you see so many unintentionally making it about them. And it's like, I get that you have feelings, but you are a grown up, and you are stewarding the heart of a little tiny, so listen, it's not about you, know, and just doing everything, absolutely fighting for a relationship and fighting for their breakthrough, and just like you said, lots of rejection in the process. I totally hear you on that. But being like, can you remove yourself from this equation so then you can actually put your kids' full story priority and in the front seat,
Absolutely. And I think also just like the Lord, what if the Lord wrote us off after our first rejection? I mean, I make the same mistakes.
I'd be done.
I make the same mistakes over and over and over. Like, I have found with adoptive parents, a lot of time that thing that I'll hear is, well, I tried, and then, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, listen, I understand that it is hard and that it takes a lot of endurance, but I need you to buck up. And I need you to not take it personally. And I need you to not take this rejection personally and be able to say, all right, what is best for my kid? And honestly, what does God have to say about redemption and restoration? It's not, well, you get one and done. It's, I'm in it for the long haul. And if you are an adoptive parent, you are in it for the long haul. This is not a short-term journey. This is a marathon where the finish line really isn't, I don't know if there is one. Like, you're going to keep running this race. And when our kids are adults, they're going to be navigating the complexities of being adult adoptees and figuring out what type of relationship they want to have with their adoptive family and their birth family. And so it's you're in it for the long haul of saying, hey, I'm not here for this like storybook fairy tale. I'm in it for the grit. I'm in it for the hard and the good. And I'm just going to walk with you and do what I think it is to be faithful, but that means dying to yourself daily and not making it about you.
So good. It's so good. Oh, I just had so many questions go through my head, and then you just say something powerful, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, well, one thing that when you were just talking that was crossing my mind, a lot of people will ask me, okay, they're so worried about attachment. Right. They're so worried. And people have this concept that if they're older, it's going to be a lot harder. And there's a lot of different stigmas and but what I feel like a lot of people years down the road will come to me and say, hey, I'm actually having a hard time attaching as the mother, and a few fathers have even reached out to my husband, Zach. What would you say to the mother that's really, really afraid to admit that she's having a hard time attaching to her child, honestly, whether adoptive or not?
Yeah.
Like, what would you say to that woman?
I was going to say, I would tell her she's not alone. And it's not just a purely adoption thing. I have had friends who have birthed children and said, I don't feel that maternal thing. That I hear my friends talking about this, like, oh my word, I'm so in love with this baby. This like this switch. I did not think I was a very maternal person. And then I had babies. And I remember, like, during the C-section, I heard one of the girls didn't cry, but one of them did. And I remember being like, and it was like a switch inside of me. Like, all my friends are shocked that I have had kids. I am not a maternal human. But something, that like switch, it just went, and when I had children. And so, I understand what women are talking about. They're like, oh, I felt this maternal urge, and all of a sudden here I am. Like, it's a hormonal thing. It's a biological thing. And I would just say, what if someone else is like, I don't have that? That's fine. Doesn't mean you're less of a mother. It does mean, though, that you shouldn't do this alone, that you should reach out and get help. There's all sort of attachment therapies for not just children, but for the parents. And so I'd highly recommend talking to an attachment therapist for yourself and for your child.
So good.
And there's no shame in that. There's zero shame. This side of glory, there are a number of things that are broken and don't work right with our bodies. And so I would just be like, hey, this doesn't have to be a big thing or a stigma, or it is a big thing. Don't get me wrong. It's a big thing when you're not attaching to your child and the child's not attaching to you. But just like there are certain things that we get help for all the time. I mean, I'm in therapy. We have kids who've been in OT. We have had kids who are in therapy for others. I mean, we've gotten help for a lot of things. And so 100%. I just said, just don't be afraid to ask for help. There are specialists out there who can help you, and there's no shame in that. Don't walk through it alone. Don't walk through it alone.
100%.
But also, it's not just an adoption thing. So I've had just as many women birth children go, uh-oh, I don't love this. I'm not happy. I cognitively, like, I know that I love my child, but I don't feel it. And that's okay. That's why there's attachment therapy out there.
That's so good. I think even like you just said, going to therapy, I have been such an advocate of counseling. That's what I originally went to school for. Cool. And it's interesting because as you press into your own healing and like just emotional soul awareness, you realize you're stringing these moments of like, oh, wait, I'm struggling with this because of this in my child or this or whatever. It's so enlightening. And then I think when you're able to see kind of wounds or whatever, your story up close and personal, the compassion on yourself starts to settle in, and you're like, you know what? Yeah, I'm not attaching, but look at what I've worked through, and I'm going to get there. And it's like, you break your foot and get surgery, you're going to commit to going to the PT because that's what the doctor tells you to do. If your heart is hurting and you're having surgery on attachment with your child, then you go to the person that can walk you through. Like, this concept of not being able to get help is just like excruciating. And I get it. There's costs, there's time, I get it. But sometimes there are always people who are willing to help. There's just so many resources. And so, I mean, it took me a journey to get there. So anyone listening to this, that's like easy for you to say, but commit to it is what we're emphasizing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's normal if like I've had friends and experienced my own attachment for every child has been different. Every 100%. Different. So if you're like, oh, this worked on this one and like, it's not working over here, that's fine. Let's get help elsewhere. Let's get help from this situation. 100%. It doesn't mean you don't like this child. It doesn't mean that there's, that this is going to be a horrible relationship. Those things that we say is like, okay, I'm not attaching, therefore I'm going to have a horrible relationship with this child. This child's going to be ruined because I'm not attaching. Let's go ahead and not jump ahead. Let's just stay in the present moment and go, I am not attaching, so I need help with this because it's important. It is important, but it doesn't mean it's not the end of the world for me and this kid.
100%. And like your whole book says, love is not enough.
Correct.
That is not going to attach us. That's not the bridge to a fully healthy, connected, like it takes more intentionality. And as the parents, we get to be the ones that fight for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Well, Brittany, what is at the end of each podcast, and this can be a micro scale of in the last 2 weeks what the Lord's teaching you, the last decade, what is the Lord teaching you?
I think the Lord, this move, if I'm going to be really honest with you, this move from Texas to Wilmington, North Carolina has been hard, which is bizarre because I didn't think it would be this hard. Because we're going back.
There's alligators in your yard.
That's true. That is true. There have been some gators fighting in our neighborhood. There's actually a gator in there's a creek that goes through our neighborhood. And so they kind of migrate through. There's literally a gator in our creek this week. And it's
absolutely not. See, when you posted that, I was like, game over. I am out.
I did not realize that would be a thing here, but it is. But there's rattlesnakes in Texas. So, each place has its own thing. We had a snake invasion in our last house in Texas in our yard. So, I mean, it's fine. But, the interesting thing is I love North Carolina. But I grew to love where I was. I didn't love it necessarily like the town in and of itself. I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm so pumped about moving there, but I moved there. We had a sweet community. And, I think leaving that community and coming to Wilmington and restarting again at this season has been really, really difficult. And so the Lord, I think one of the things he's been teaching me is like, hey, your faith in different seasons is going to look differently. And right now it's very ordinary. It's really mundane. This has been hard. And so it's not going to look like this very rich, vibrant, where people are in and out of our house all the time, people talking about the Lord over our dinner table. You're connected to a variety of pastors and faith communities in the old town. And so I'd run into somebody at a coffee shop and we'd have this deep conversation about what they're teaching on Sunday or, different stuff. And I was like, that's just not happening here. And that is okay. Because at first I was like, is there something wrong with I attached it to, okay, what's wrong with me spiritually? I'm lacking some of these things. I can't find them. It looks differently. And finally it was just like, man, you got to rest in me and trust that the work that I'm doing in your life, it's going to look different in this season. And that's okay. But it's not that I have to work harder or be better or do something more flashy or I'm an Enneagram 3, which I know not everyone does Enneagram, but I'm achievement oriented, meaning that like I'm always striving for a goal.
Same.
And so it's just like, it's just like, all right, like Brittany, chill and just rest and be in the season and be beloved and walk with me and let me walk with you in this space that I've called you to, that I've gone before you. I've provided. It might not look the same as Texas, but I've already provided and provided manna for this season. So will you trust me with this? And I feel like that's what the Lord has been doing the last 2 years, is he's brought everything down much smaller, much slower. And I'm trying to acclimate to that, and him being like, I'm still faithful in this. Yes. This was not better. It's just different.
It's so good. And even recognizing, like, I think sometimes when we feel that loneliness, it's like you said, you're instant to be like, oh Lord, how can I?
Yeah.
Am I, like,
I'll fix it.
Yeah, I'll fix it. And I'll like fight it with gratitude. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful. And you're just, but sometimes it's like understanding. I actually just wrote a whole chapter on this, the concept in Seasons of Grief of understanding the difference of loneliness and aloneness, and the crucial part of aloneness and abiding in the Father in seasons of transition and disappointment and questions. And I think you moved, what is that, like 7 states away? My map is, and it's like you came to a whole new, did you know anyone there? Was it where you were raised?
So it's where my husband was raised. So his entire family lives about 45 minutes away. Okay. And so he has a lot of people here. And we know a lot of people here, but I don't know them, if that makes sense. Oh, sure. We have a lot of family connections. It's rich. Yes. But I lived in Raleigh for 10 years, which is about 2 hours away. And so all my people are about 2 hours away still. Yeah. And so it's all very new, very new.
Yes. And I feel like your husband was probably driving that moving truck, like, babe, like the promised land, like this. And you're like, wait, I'm excited. But the tension of oh gosh, that's a lot. I think, what would you say, since this is what the Lord has been harvesting in this season in you, how have you been able to reconcile different, and like you said, it's not any better, it's just different. How do you reconcile and kind of just grab a hold of the joy that's necessary to continue moving on and mothering and all those things? How do you reconcile the difference and really commit to growing?
Well, and the weird thing is if you were like, Brittany, choose a place to live, Texas or North Carolina, I'd be like North Carolina, because I love North Carolina. So it's not all ugh, I have to move to North Carolina, leave Texas. Totally. But I think it's just embracing and allowing myself to feel the both and nature of hey, when I was in Texas, I missed North Carolina. Now that I'm in North Carolina, I have another place to miss. I now miss Texas. But totally. I think what Satan can do is he can take that miss and keep our eyes fixated on something to where we can't see what's right in front of us. And so what I've had to do is you can miss this, but let's keep our eyes forward. And in the sense of you can be sad about, we had friends who lived in a neighborhood across the street who became family to us, and they would pop in our house, a couple times a week. And I'm like, okay, you can be sad about not seeing them on a regular basis anymore. Of course. That's okay to grieve that loss, because it is a loss. Yes. We still love those people, but I don't see them 2 to 3 times a week. And that's sad, and that's okay. But also, look what the Lord has done in providing us to be here to where my husband is able to see his grandparents, who are all 4 still living, who now our kids are able to meet all 4 great grandparents and have real memories of actual quality time with them that we wouldn't have gotten when we were in Texas. So it's just that nature of both and. You can feel gratitude for a place and gratitude for a season, and we don't have to pit them against each other. But I think as soon as you start to either compare to the point of okay, they're just different. This is not better, but I can lie to myself and say this is better to discount what the Lord is doing here. I think Satan would be thrilled if I did that. And so how do I just say, I'm so grateful for this. I miss this. I'm so grateful for this. I know that the Lord has gone before us here, and he will provide relationships in a way that I could never imagine. My college best friends moved down the road this last year. Won't he do it?
Yes, come on.
I know that I will make new friends here at some point in time. He will provide that. And I know he's going to do that for my kids. And I know it's also just a part of trusting the Lord and teaching our kids, hey, when they moved here, they had a hard time too. Mommy's having a hard time too. We're trusting that God has called us here, and he will provide good things along the way. It doesn't mean that there won't be hard things, but we're going to learn to trust him, and we're going to learn to be all here for where he's called us.
Come on. You're such a powerhouse, dude. Oh,
Girl.
My goodness.
Girl, no. I'm just constantly having to teach myself.
You're preaching to yourself.
Preach to myself. That's all.
I love it. Well, okay, so last question. You said you're a reader. I'm also a fellow huge reader. What are you reading right now?
Okay, so I am on I do this every couple years. Oh.
Yeah!
Yes! I knew it would at some point. Zeke, can you say hello? Hi.
Hi,
Hey, Zeke,
buddy.
Zeke, can you give Mommy a few more minutes, and can you go back into the room with Sissy? You can't. Go get a breakfast bar real quick. Go get a breakfast bar. Okay, sorry.
We're good.
Did it.
I love it.
I told you. There's 5 kids
Honestly,
here.
Oh, are you kidding? If all four of mine would have been in here, and the dog.
Yes, absolutely. Dogs are at least locked up. Dogs are locked up. I don't lock my children up, but my dogs are locked up. Okay, sorry. Oh, books. Okay, sorry. I was like, what is the question again? Books. Yeah. So I do this every so often where I tell myself, you are not allowed to read another Christian book. Same. Don't read a Christian book. You're on a fiction, just read straight fiction.
Yes. Yes.
I have been doing the Book of the Month Club. Have you heard of that?
On Instagram.
On Instagram, yes. And so I've done it for quite a few years now. In fact, actually, all of these books and up there, and I have a section upstairs, they're all Book of the Month Club books. So I've done it for many years. And what I'll do, they give you this selection of hey, it's an app. You pay for it. But it's here are these 6 books. Pick one and we ship it to you every month. And so that has been my way to be introduced to writers I would never think of. It's also just beach reads and all sorts of fiction. Some of it's good. Some of it you're that's junk.
Yeah, totally.
No, thank you. No, thank you. But that has been one of the things that I've really done. But I also do memoirs.
I love that.
A lot of memoirs. And so that's allowed. So I'm fiction and memoirs. That's the kick I've been on.
So what are you reading right now?
So right now I'm actually listening to, it's an audiobook, John Stamos's memoir. Uncle Jesse. Uncle Jesse.
I bet that's so good.
It is. Now there's language, and obviously
Sure.
I don't think he's a believer. I'm halfway through it. I think he was raised Catholic, but I'm not getting, he's telling his life story. And so there are I want to say, every time I recommend a book, I get nervous because I always get people in my DMs
we
who
won't
are
hold you. Oh,
people in my DMs, and I'm like, y'all, I read a wide variety of people. It 100%. Doesn't mean I agree with every life decision they've made.
100%.
But I'm currently listening to his memoir, and it's fascinating. And if I'm doing a memoir, I try to, if it's narrated by them, I'll listen to it because I like to hear it in their voice.
100%. Oh, I love that.
What are you reading?
I am reading, so I'm doing a spiritual formation program with one of my heroes. Do you know Alicia Britt Chole?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
So I'm not friends with her, but I know she is. Yeah.
Yes, when she writes, I'm just oh my gosh. And so her program, we read 2 books a month. And so right now the signed one is called The Wired Soul, which is basically breaking your addiction to technology. And cool. The whole book is focused on why you shouldn't basically read the Bible on your phone and how you should read the Bible in your hand. And I love her. She's coming at it from a very neurological standpoint. And I love data. I love tell me also. And so it's breaking down a lot of just facts about the brain. Cool. And I'm tell me more. And also I need to break this addiction. So help me, liberate me from this. So
love that.
That's what I'm reading.
I love that.
Okay, well, Brittany, I knew we were going to be kindred souls. I have been so excited for this conversation. So thank you for, like I said, just cracking open an hour of your life and sharing just your heart with us. Where can people find you on socials?
I'm at Brittany Salmon. My middle initial is Nicole, for Nicole. I don't know why I did that back, 12 years ago, but it stuck. So totally. Brittany Salmon is where I'm at Instagram. My website, I have it's Brittany Salmon, but I'm more active on Instagram. I'm trying to be better at my newsletter, but let's be real. It
priority.
So Instagram. 100%. Instagram's a great place.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. Well, thank you again.
Hey, thank you.
Amazing. I said this in the episode, but I'm Brittany, you literally talk in Post-it notes. You are such a powerhouse. I am just so grateful that she carved out time to be able to have this conversation together. And so like she said, you can find her on Instagram at Brittany Salmon. You can buy her book, which I highly recommend, whether you have adopted or not. This book is just powerful. It's called It Takes More Than Love. And like I always say at the end of every episode, when you leave little comments or you rate it on, Spotify or Apple or whatever you're listening to, it does help these conversations hit more ears. And so I would be so, so grateful if you did do that. If something that Brittany said stood out to you, share it on socials, share it, tag her. This is just, this is how we get these conversations into more ears. And so thank you. You could be anywhere. Thank you for tuning in to the Let Me Ask You This podcast, and we will see you next time.